Welcome to the podcast. It starts with you, with me, Vic O'Farrell. I ask my guests, by understanding their own behaviours and personality style, what impact on their lives, both personally and professionally, has there been? What is it like to live and work with someone of your style? I mean, this is not about labelling people, putting people in boxes, or an excuse for bad behaviour. It's about recognising, understanding and respecting that we're all different. And what impact can you have on others by looking in the mirror? Because it starts with you. So here we are on another one of these great episodes of It Starts With You. And I'm excited and a half because I'm with my Julie. So for those of you who are listening or even watching on YouTube, you've probably seen the wonderful Julie Creffield in my life for the last 5 years. She's been the most amazing business coach for me, helping me to transform where I've come from and been. But Julie, let me hand over to you so you can tell the listeners and the viewers a little bit more about what you do and who you are.
Yeah, so I'm a business legacy strategist. I call myself the solopreneurs champion because I have been a solopreneur myself for coming up to 29 years. And I have supported thousands and thousands of other solo business owners. I've definitely worked with businesses that are not one-person bands, but I think my sweet spot and my heart is with those brave people that are out there, figuring it all out as they go and doing amazing things in the world, and just need a little bit of support, encouragement, and information about how to leave a legacy when they don't have a big team or a heap of money to throw at things.
But also you've been great, and sorry listeners, but I'm just doing a little bit of promo here for Julie, because I think of when we've worked together, and this has been the last 5 years, because it can be really lonely running a business, especially when we come on to behaviors and we talk about, I mean, our behaviors are very similar, but we talk about people like me. It's a very lonely place being a solopreneur. So to have someone like you in my world, but also all of those programs that I was part of, because then I'm suddenly feeling like I'm part of a team, though I'm not with people, everyone's on their own business journey, but I feel I'm part of a team.
Yeah, and it's interesting, I did a master's in multimedia design and culture back in 2000. And one of the things I was really interested in is how, I could see that there was going to be this big raft of creative business owners coming into the world because technology was, ramping up, social media was becoming a thing. I just graduated from uni where I did a really creative course, and nobody had any careers advice, right? And those people that come in from the media or from the arts, they are often solopreneurs, they're freelancers, right? They're working for themselves. And there was no structure to support those people. And I could see, even back then, pre-Facebook, pre-Instagram, pre-Zoom, I could see that there was a role for using technology to bring people together. It's almost like I predicted the pandemic, while most people were like pulling their hair out, and I was pulling my hair out, it was also an incredible opportunity for me to showcase the power of online community and connection and using the online world in a really interesting kind of heart-led way.
Yeah, because if you think about all of the programs that you're doing, we all met on Zoom. I mean, we had to at the time because it was, COVID times. But actually, from where we were, you had people from all over the world coming into those programs. You couldn't have. I remember what Adam was on. What was that program? Million Lives Club, I think, or that. And he was dialing in from New Zealand. He was on the other side of the world.
Yeah.
So it was such a great community that you all brought together. You couldn't have run that if we didn't have something like Zoom. How would you have got us all together?
I think I also reflect on the fact that, online business coaches are not a new thing. There are heaps of us, there are millions of us all over the place, and we all operate in very different ways. And I have to remember where I came from. I came into the online world as a business owner, not doing business coaching, right? I run a very successful solopreneur business that was in a completely different niche. right? I had a company called Too Fat to Run, and I built that bootstrapping it, built a global movement. Millions of people were impacted by that business. And so I think there's this interesting idea in the online world that most people are making their money from teaching other people how to make money in the online world. It's this really like weird, some people feel like it's a bit of a pyramid scheme and all of that, but we have to remind ourselves that online is a route to market. It's not the only route to market. And so what I tend to do is work with a lot of business owners that are kind of hybrid, that they're kind of proper business owners. They're doing work out in the real world with real people, but they use parts of the online world to leverage and scale up. You know, and I think from a personality point of view, those of us that are like high and kind of woohoo, we're suckers for being drawn into the online world a little bit, because we are influenced. You know, we are influencers for sure, but we also respond to people who have high influence because we're like, oh, I want to be more like them. And so I've learned definitely in the last decade to be wary of that for myself, you know, to not get drawn in emotionally to all of the bells and whistles and the aesthetic of success, and to really go inwards and go, actually, what does success look like for me?
That's very interesting, because I was going to say, obviously, for those that listening or watching, if you know my style, if you've listened to them before, I'm very high I, very high yellow, outgoing, peoply person. And you are also the same, Julie, but you've also got the red in you. So that's the task, that's the doers, that's the decision making. So what has it meant to you by understanding your own profile? What impact has it had, both business and professionally?
I think when we go into business, we don't think about all of this stuff. We just want to crack on with the stuff that we're interested in, right? And for me, when I first graduated, I was working predominantly in the Thames Gateway area, where there was lots of redevelopment, there was lots of work for consultants, right? And because I sound like I'm from East London, because I am, I was very employable to the big organizations that wanted somebody to go into communities to sound like those people. So I just went where the work was. I wasn't very strategic. My, you know, deciding factor was, is it interesting? Am I going to get bossed around? You know, I'm not very good. I'm a bit of a maverick. I don't like, you know, too many rules. So I wanted to be able to be creative and have that influence, you know, but then move on, right? So my early part of my career, I didn't think about any of this stuff. But there's definitely signs looking back that, you know, my personality style worked well in some settings, not so well in other settings, right? So when I worked in the public sector as a consultant, I used to shake with rage at how ridiculous the structures were, and the detail, the level of detail you had to give them. Like, who cares? You know, I don't want to have to fill in that form. Why do I, you know, and the bureaucracy used to drive me bonkers. You know, I couldn't stay in that sector. And so I think as I have evolved as a business owner, I realized that understanding myself, not just in terms of DISC, but in terms of you know, my recent realization that I have ADHD, that plays a part for me. Understanding those traits about myself, understanding my strengths, all of these things combined help me to figure out what success looks like for me in my business and what the systems need to be. Right? We're not all the same. And I always say that about solopreneurs. You know, I have a quiz that helps people to figure out what kind of solopreneur business they're running, because we're not all driven by the same things. Some people just want to, you know, an hourly rate, do 20 hours a week, and they're happy with that. They don't want legacy. They don't want a big team. They don't, and that's fine. You know, there's no judgment. And so I think a big thing that I'm passionate about is listening to yourself a little bit more, you know, trusting yourself, learning who you are and how success looks for you. Like, what is it you're actually working towards? And I think DISC, I think, you know, strengths, I use the strength finder process, you know, understanding my 5 key strengths. Those things combined help me to not only design a business that works for me, but most of the time, not all the time, most of the time, stay out of trouble and stay out of like that. There's only one way to grow a successful business rhetoric.
But that also can help in terms of, like you said, some people just want to do a freelancing, just an hourly rate. That's all I want to do. Some people want to build a brand, want to build legacy. You've been amazing in helping me do that.
Yeah.
But then that also can come down to our values, not just our personalities, because there isn't, because people go, oh, so, surely, you know, all the CEOs of the world need to be a high red. And I'm like, well, no, because they don't always make the best CEOs. That you've got to have a rounded understanding, coming in with your strengths, coming in with your values, because otherwise you can do that burnout, can't you?
Yeah.
And I'm going to say that word clubhouse to you
Yeah, yeah.
because you hit it there and I hit it there. I know we were in a different world because we were in lockdown, but it is that influence of like, actually, everyone's doing it. This is going to be amazing. What was your experience in terms of understanding who you were when you were on there?
Yeah, Clubhouse was great for me. It combined a lot of things that made showing up easy for me. It was an audio only app, which meant I didn't have to do my hair. I wasn't being judged for how I looked. I could do my, I did a show called Breakfast Minus the Bullshit. And, I could get up in the morning and do that and still be in bed or be on my Peloton bike or whatever. I loved it. I could be myself. I could use humor. I could, you know, hold space for other people. That's what I'm really good at, that facilitation piece. Give other people the platform, showcase my expertise. It was great that you could drive people to your Instagram, which I already had a big following on. So I made a heap of money on that platform, but it also raised my profile and put me on the radar of other people that had been operating in the online space that all of a sudden were like, who is this person? How dare she? How dare she be having all of this success? And it did cause some burnout for me when, some of those icky conversations had, happened behind closed doors. And, my ADHD trait is I have this kind of rejection sensitivity. I want everyone to like me, and I have this core value of fairness. So when I see things that I feel are not fair, I speak out about them and then often get shot down, because I don't often take a breath before going in and going, that's not right. And I'm learning that about myself. I have to stop jumping into these arguments. They're not my arguments to have.
No, but I do hear you on that because it's definitely my high core value is also fairness. So we are very similar on that. And there were times when, when we first met and I'd be like, oh my God, look at this most amazing, successful person. She's amazing. I want to be like Julie. And then he'd be like, but why do I want to be like Julie? I want to be like me. I want to be successful, but I want to be like me. And I do find that sometimes that kind of personality, if we actually look at when you were launching your programs, especially in that online, well, I know you were still in the online world, but in the whole lockdown thing of you created a suite of programs that was very natural to go from one to the next to the next.
Yeah.
But if we look at the buying cycle of different personalities,
Yeah.
I was probably your ideal customer.
Yeah.
Because we had the know, like, and trust. We'd started working together. And so I didn't even sometimes even ask what the detail of the program was. I just was like, I'm in.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
How have you found it working with people who are the opposite style to the likes of you and
Yeah.
me?
I used to find it frustrating, right? And not only do I not have much kind of compliance and detail and all of that kind of stuff, I also have ADHD and perimenopause, and I'm a single mum. Right? So
Chuck it all in.
chuck it all in, and I'll be like, I've got this thing. It's going to be amazing. It's going to help you do X, Y, Z. And then like all of the detail, people would be like, yeah, but what date does it start? How is it being run? What stage of business do I need to be at? And so now when I'm putting materials together, I have to make sure that I include some of that detail. But interestingly, there's also a strategy that says if you leave the detail out, people ask for the detail. So you then start to build up what I call converting conversations. And so and this is what a lot of high eyes do, is that they go, here's all of this stuff, right? And then they get crickets, right? And then they go, oh, no one wants it. Oh, I'll do something else. Here's a new thing. Here's all stuff, right? And so in terms of buy-in cycles, I do a lot of launches, quite, low cost, low tech launches. But, a launch has a period of time that you have to create an energetic high, right? So you have to launch, create curiosity, create intrigue, drive people to a moment in time where there's a little bit of urgency and a little bit of scarcity, and then give them a little bit more time, the thinkers, to think it through, and then there has to be a close, right? So that a lot of my work is done in that way. And it's interesting seeing the sales figures as they come in, because all of the people that buy on launch day, they are all the high eyes. They're like, yes, they've been just waiting for the moment like this. Ask no questions. They're like, just buy now. And then, it literally goes through the cycle a little bit, the disc cycle. And it's those people right at the end that needed more detail, that needed reassurance, that needed time to think it through, time to speak to their partner, time to compare it to other programs that might be similar. They might need 2 or 3 sales calls, which for someone like me is frustrating. Because actually I want decision makers. I want people that are not going to spend 10 hours deciding which email platform to use, right? Because that indecision wastes time and energy. And sometimes you've got to just make a decision, even if it's the wrong decision, because then you learn and you make the right decision much faster than if you spend forever deciding, But it's so difficult if you are naturally that more careful, considered person. But it's definitely not me. That's not me at all.
No. And I can now imagine all of those people who are listening to this, who have got that high C, the compliance, going, but make a decision even if it's not the right one. But why would I have made that decision in the first place? That's why I take the time, because I want to make sure when I make a decision, because it would reflect on, in terms of their personality, they'd be thinking, I made the wrong decision. And they'd kind of beat themselves up a little bit over it. Whereas the likes of you and me, even the D star, so the outgoing is far more, well, I've made a decision, like you say, learn from it. We'd get worried because we'd feel a bit of rejection if we made the wrong decision from someone personally. Even the S star will still make a slower decision. And I think it is that whole, and it's not just, if you're listening to this, it's not just about, but selling to solopreneurs. This is the buying cycle of all individuals. You can't force people. And when you can read the signs of who it is that you're selling to, the minute they say, oh, but what day of the week would the calls be on? Or anything to do with a bit more detail, straight away will tell you, okay, that's first of all a buying signal that they're interested, but it's also a signal that they're not going to buy straight away. And if you try and push them, you'll turn them off.
And I think where this is really important, it doesn't really matter how you're selling or who you're selling to, but there will be a period of time that I call no man's land, right? It's where all the initial hype has died down and you're continuing to talk about your product and nobody's buying. And because nobody's buying, you think nobody's interested in buying. And then you make really silly decisions by either taking it off the market or discounting or throwing your toys out the pram, when actually all you needed to do was continue giving detail, reassuring, giving case studies, reminding people that there's a closing date. Because the other thing that's really funny is the high I people often leave it to the last minute. So they're like, oh, I wanted to do that, but then I went off on holiday and then I forgot about it, and but I really want in. So often the day after close, you'll get a lot of high eyes going, oh, I really wanted to do it. Can I join? I was just a bit chaotic, and all of that kind of stuff. So it's just understanding that, and having systems in place to remind yourself that not all of your clients buy or want to be sold in the same way that you buy and you want to be sold. And that has taken me a long time to remember that.
Oh, absolutely. And I totally get that. If I look back at my last corporate role, when I worked for the service office company Regis, and I was 10 years, I think I worked there doing different roles. And I had no self-awareness of my eye. I had no self-aware of how irritating I probably was. And I think when I was selling, all I could be thinking of was my target. And, and it's coming up to last day of the month and we'd have war rooms and we'd be just going mental. And I'm thinking all of those people that just probably thought I'm just not buying. I turned them off because I was too high. And I think that's the whole self-awareness piece, isn't it? No man's land. What you've just described there is absolutely in every sales cycle, no matter what you're selling.
Yeah. And I think the problem that we have, particularly as solopreneurs, is we know this stuff, right? We go on a course, we get reminded of like our profile, or we go on a course and we remember how to sell. And then in the day-to-day, we forget it all, right? Because we're focused on something else. And so one of the things that I did last year was I took a massive step back to really listen more than I spoke, which for somebody like me is really hard. And and I really thought about solopreneurs as a whole and how we can break them into groups to think about what each of those groups need, not only in terms of their personality, but in terms of what their ambitions are, the scale of their ambitions, where they are in their journey, and what are the things that run across all of them. And so I think there are 9 core areas for solopreneurs, regardless of where you are, how successful, how big, how small. And one of the things that I realized, even though those 9 things exist, some of them I just ignore, right? So personally, I'm like, systems, and some people are the opposite. They're like, I don't want to think about sales, I don't want to think about marketing. And so one of the things that I did during lockdown out of absolute necessity was I had to develop a system for managing all of the information that was going on in my business. I was running 2 online businesses. I was homeschooling my 7-year-old, having a nervous breakdown in the evenings with a bottle of wine. It was a vibe. And I think I worked with about 3,000 clients that year. And so can you imagine the level of communication, the level of information? They were all at different stages on different programs. And I did have a VA, but I couldn't expect them to keep on top of all of that stuff. So I was forced to look at the detail. I was forced to create a system. And over time, my clients, particularly the ones that have been working with me for a long time, would hear me talk about my dashboard and they'd go, let's have a look. And I would show them, like, this is what I do, and this is how I keep track of my affiliates, and this is da 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 da. And they were like, could you create a version of this for us? And so I created a very simple version for them. And that has evolved into something I call the Solopreneur Dashboard, which I am so proud of, Vic, like, because it's so detailed. And when I look at that, I know that that tool, which is a really low cost tool for people, if they use that, it almost has like an accumulative effect. Regardless of what your personality style is or your strength, use it 15 minutes a day or an hour a week, and over time it becomes the HQ. It's almost like a separate brain. So when you are a little bit overwhelmed or tired or have lots of things to juggle, you can go, right, what do I know to be true for me when it comes to sales? And you can go to the sales part of it. Or what are the systems I need to put in place but don't have time to do it? Oh, I can go into there and I can list them. So at some point in the future, I can do it. Or I can bring in a VA to look at that part of the dashboard. And, creating that wasn't the easiest thing I've ever done, because all I want to create is videos and group programs and do everything live and have a bit of a razzmatazz. But I also knew that without that tool, I am making it hard for people, because it doesn't matter what your personality style is. There are some things you have to do to remain compliant, to remain solvent, and to create the success that you want in your business. And it will go against your personality type, right? And even if you say, I'm really like not that kind of person, I'll just get in a VA. You still got to manage that VA. You still got to give them information about how you want to do things, because that's all that systems are. They're how you want to do things. And that has been probably the best investment of my time ever, because I'm in it for the long game.
Well, I've actually got here written down systems with lots of exclamation marks, because I remember that was one thing, that dashboard that you created, because it was just like, Julie's done so much detail stuff. But like you say, and this is the thing, it's like, just because my personality says that I'm high yellow followed with a high D, it doesn't mean that I can't slow down and I can't dive into the detail and I can't stop and consider everyone else and take them on the journey. It's just not my natural style. I have to work at, like you say, I have to work at it. I can't sit there for a long time in that, because it's exhausting for me. But I can do it because I recognize where I do have those gaps.
Yeah. And for me to enable me to do that level of detail, I had to bring creativity into it. So the dashboard is sexy. It looks great. It gives people the ability to rebrand it so that they feel ownership over it.
Yeah.
Because any time that I'd used similar technology before, I was like, oh, this is so dull. This is so boring. I'm losing the will to live, you know? Whereas every time I go into my version of the dashboard, because obviously there's a template, but when I go into my version, which I've been using for the last 4 years, I actually enjoy being in there because it's sexy and fun and reminds me of all the things that I need reminding of on a daily basis. It's like
Mm,
having my own team.
mm,
There's a cheerleader in there, and there's a systems person, there's a HR person, you know, and all of that information is there so that I know exactly what I'm doing.
mm. Because that's the other thing, is that we lack that detail of, but we also get distracted, don't we, by
Yeah.
bright shiny things and unicorns.
Yeah, and so actually a big part on the left-hand side of my dashboard is my big overarching goal for the year, and then 6 key objectives, and then all of those move into what I'm doing quarterly, and then what I need to do weekly. And so anytime I am distracted by something, I go every day, I go into that dashboard and go, I don't think it's going to get me where I'm trying to go because I've already done the thinking around what I need to do. And
Yeah.
sometimes an opportunity comes up and it's so good that you go, oh, actually, there's a little bit of wriggle room. I can do it. But most of the time, it gives me the boundaries that naturally I don't have.
Yeah. I love that. Talking of personalities, you also created the archetypes, didn't you?
Yeah.
And that with personalities. So just tell us a little bit more about these archetypes.
Yeah, so I mean, I've been running group programs for as long as I've been in business, right? So my very first freelance job was assistant director on a big community arts project in East London. It was called We All Come From Somewhere Else. It was, God, when I think about it now, it gives me goosebumps. And my job was to manage the young people that were in that program. And we all come to group work in different ways. Some of us want to be center of attention, some of us don't want to participate. And I've seen that play out in every situation with politicians, with young offenders, with, you know, masses of volunteers in online groups. And I wanted a system or a process of thinking about how you behave in a group setting, right? And not only how you behave in a group setting, but how you can facilitate groups, how you
Mhm.
can build tribes. I don't use the word tribe so much in my work anymore, but I definitely used to. And so I built the tribe leadership archetype system to help really have a shared understanding of the different ways that you can build an audience, because there's not just one way. And so it's based on 13 archetypes, and they're all different. And you know, you are most definitely the queen, right? You know, and that was one of the things that came out of the work that we did on Tribe Builder. But we're never just one thing.
No.
So I use these 12 with a system called the Shine Bright system, which is like a diamond. And you have at the top of the diamond, you have your most aligned styles. And at the bottom, you have the ones that you're most adverse to. And so the ones that you're most adverse to, you probably need to dial up a little bit, right? And so if you have like the crusader energy, which I do, always wanting to fight for change, I need to dial that down and probably bring up some of my more nurturing, you know, my more
Your
nurturing
mother.
style.
Yeah.
And so, you know, you have your 3 at the top, you have your 3 at the bottom, and you have 3 in the middle that give you a different perspective. So when you get stuck in your own way of doing something, you can just shift the diamond a little bit to, you know, and it's something in jewelry, in you know, in jewels, which is called reflection and retraction, which is like, you know, the diamond only shines bright when there's a bit of darkness, right?
Hmm.
And so sometimes those things that we don't want to do are really good for us,
Mm.
you know, even though they're challenging, right? So I would never say to somebody that doesn't want to facilitate a group, like, you've got to go out and facilitate an audience of 1,000 people. But developing your facilitation skills is going to help you when you do a Zoom call with 5 people.
Yeah.
So it's understanding not only a style of doing something, but what sits beneath it. And this is in one of my books, is some really practical things. Like, if
Mm.
you are this type of leader, you probably don't want to do a membership. So memberships for me are quite hard because they require quite a bit of nurturing. Right? And so if you are a born nurturer and you want to give, memberships are great.
Yeah.
But it actually, if you're a teacher and all you want to do is teach people how to do something, great. But some of the other archetypes are not going to work for you, and some of the other business models are not going to work for you. So it's more a system to do some of the thinking, because we can get in our own head about the only way to do success.
Yeah. And I think that's what, like I say, what I've loved about working with you, but also being on your group programs, as well as working with you one-to-one, is the fact that you have all of those different archetypes. Like I've been on programs with you, and it's like you say, yes, the Queen came out, and that's why we ended up rebranding as the Queen of Behaviours. But it's like, but when I didn't need the Queen energy, when I needed the mother energy, that nurturing energy, which probably comes more with the green, the S style in terms of disc, it was actually finding someone else on the group program who is also running their own business to actually be able to go, so hold on a minute, how would you do that? And actually have that conversation. Because like you say, running a business can be very lonely, but actually you just need, it was like having a soundboard of all of these other different styles, personalities, archetypes, to be able to say, what does it look like for you? And I loved how you facilitated it by understanding what our style was. You shifted yourself into something completely opposite so you could then challenge us, because you love a challenge.
I do. And I think ultimately it comes down to every day we get out of bed and we have work to do, and we have to lead ourselves.
Yeah.
We have to, make decisions, deal with stuff that we don't always want to. We're the CEO and the chief grafting officer. So we're the CEO and the employee and HR. So we are all of those roles which require slightly different ways of going about things. And so for me, I have my archetypes on my dashboard, on my pin board and on my dashboard. And sometimes I sit here and I'm a bit overwhelmed and I go, who do I need to be today? Who do I need to be? Or who do I have the capacity to be? Because sometimes it's slightly different, right? When I'm full of energy, it's like, who do I get to be today? When I've had a really hard week, it's literally, what do I have the capacity to do?
Yeah.
And actually, sometimes when I am low in capacity, I just want to give, because then it's like I'm just going to give some knowledge, or I'm going to give with no sign of needing anything back in return. I'm just going to reach out to some clients, ask how they're doing, do a little bit of that nurturing stuff, because I don't have the capacity to go out and fight or have that kind of more dominant, probably more masculine energy, because we're managing all of these things all of the time.
It is. It's what makes us human, isn't it? All those different layers of the onion. And do you know what? I could talk to you for hours, as we're both very yellow and also just both love this stuff that we dig into. If people want to get hold of you, if they're thinking, oh, I like the sound of this dashboard, or what are these archetypes? What's the best way for people to find you?
Yep. So my website is juliecreffield.com. I'm active on pretty much every social media platform. TikTok is my new, I don't know if it's my new favorite, but I can show up as myself there, which is fun. But LinkedIn, come and, let's have a chat. I call them chinwags. Do the quiz. I mean, the quiz is a great way of asking yourself some really deep questions, right? So regardless of what the results are, the process, and this is the feedback that I get, the process of going through those questions make you reflect on where you actually are.
Amazing. I shall make sure, if you're listening to this and you go, oh, where's that quiz? There's going to be in the show notes, so don't worry. And I shall make sure all your other contact details are in the show notes, Julie. So if you do want to get hold of Julie Creffield, go reach out to her. Julie, it's been amazing. I say it to most of my guests, actually. I can't believe how quickly the time goes. So any final word before we cut off?
It's interesting. I always say it starts with you. I always say that. So I couldn't have been happier, when you launched your podcast, because this podcast is an opportunity for people to reflect on them. So whenever you get stuck, whenever you feel like you don't know how, look inwards rather than outwards.
Profound. I love it. Thank you very much indeed. It's been an amazing conversation. How has this conversation had an impact on you? What have you learnt? What will you do differently? Do leave a review on Apple or Spotify on It Starts With You podcast. and also leave a comment down below. Do also then connect with me on social media. I'm on Instagram, Facebook and LinkedIn. And why not even join the Facebook group It Starts With You and keep the learning ongoing. Thank you for listening.